Hello, and welcome to the View from Sibos series, looking at the hot topics at Swift's flagship conference held in Toronto. I'm Joy Macknight, Deputy Editor at The Banker, and I'm joined by Victor Penna, Global Head of Treasury Solutions and Regional Head of Cash for Europe and Americas at Standard Chartered, to discuss major innovation trends in transaction banking. Victor, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
The big theme for Sibos this year is sort of building for the future. What does that really mean for the transaction banking business?
Well, I think it's about harnessing the power of technology to really offer new and unique solutions to clients, as well as using that same technology to improve processes and drive down costs.
And what kind of innovation are you seeing, let's say, in the cash management space?
There's actually a lot of innovation. So we hear a lot about blockchain, and banks are beginning to experiment using blockchain to process payments in faster and newer ways. But also we're seeing, greater use of open APIs, which enable people to connect more quickly and efficiently, as well as various other technologies that are sort of impacting the way that payments are made, things like mobile money, peer-to-peer payment systems. So there's a huge amount of innovation going on in the cash management space.
Okay, and what do you think about, let's say, the real-time payments? So,
Yes.
in Europe, in the US, and
Yes.
Australia, there's this big move to real-time payments.
Absolutely.
Will that have an impact?
I think it'll have a big impact because it will change the way that the treasuries manage their payment cycle and their liquidity, as well as the way that banks manage those processes as well. So you're really talking about moving from a world which is largely batch driven, operating between 9 and 5, to operating around the clock, 24/7, 365 days. And that will have, over time, a fairly radical impact on the way that people manage their banking on a day-to-day basis.
So there's this big drive to digitalization.
Yep.
What more can transaction banks do to drive that through their business?
Well, I think there'll be increasing digitalisation just of payments themselves. So there's this never-ending shift towards electronic payments. But I think you'll see greater digitalisation around some of the associated processes. So you see some governments, for example, introducing electronic means of being able to lodge documents that often are required before a payment can be made, whether exchange controls or whether you're importing or exporting. So there'll be digitisation of those processes, and in turn the banks will enable clients to communicate with them digitally with those documents. You'll definitely see it in the trade space, but in the cash space it'll be, I think, around a lot of that regulatory documentation that's required. You'll also see it in things like client setup, bank account management. More of that will move online. So I think in any process where there is paper, you'll see a lot of that move to electronic means of communication.
Okay, but it's one thing for the banks to be transforming their business, but
Yep.
it's another thing about bringing your clients along that digital
Yes.
journey with you. How is Standard Chartered doing that?
Well, we've introduced a whole series called SC Innovate, and we actually run roundtables with our clients. We've been running these in various locations around the world, and part of that is having a conversation with clients around what will the impact of digitisation be on their business, and in particular, how will that reshape treasury? Because at the end of the day, it's really treasurers that are engaging banks and buying cash management services and delivering those services to their business units. So we are having a very active dialogue around what does that look like? How will blockchain, for example, or real-time payments or APIs or robotic process automation impact treasury? And what will that do to the shape of treasury, and what will it look like in the future, and how do they prepare for that? And if we can help them understand those changes, then we can start to collaborate on specific initiatives that will drive change in areas where they would like to see an improvement.
And you talked a little bit about blockchain, but also APIs, application programming interfaces. What technology do you think is going to have the biggest impact on corporate treasury, let's say, in the next 5 years?
Well, I think it will be a combination of blockchain, APIs and robotic process automation. Blockchain will change the way banks communicate with each other. That will enable faster payments, real-time payments, 24/7 type of operation. APIs will enable corporates to connect with banks in new and different ways, and will also potentially enable other providers to come in and build networks, other types of payment and clearing networks that are outside of what we know today. And then thirdly, robotic process automation will really enable a lot of the automation and digitisation of the processes that today are constrained by what a single system can do. The great thing about robotic process automation, it can sit over the top and operate across multiple systems and processes. So that will have a fairly radical impact, I think, in terms of digitising a lot of processes today that are performed manually.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your insights,
Thank you.
Victor.